Hey there, everybody. In our main segment this week here on Mastering Dungeons, we are looking at the best of
Tomb of
the
Annihilation.
Tomb of Annihilation. Yes, the Tomb of Annihilation adventure, part of our series where we look at the adventures released for 5th edition and go back and learn some lessons about what these adventures did really, really well in our estimation. As our standard disclaimer, yes, we are aware that this adventure, as well as the other adventures that we talk about, might not be perfect. And in fact, some of them we might not even think are very good in the long run. But what we want to do is take them one by one and draw out its life force, draw out its essence. Yeah, you see what I did there, huh? You draw out its essence, and we learn the lessons to make our own adventures really hum based on what's great about these. Anything before we jump into the history of this adventure, Teos, in terms of large scale, top down look at this adventure or at anything else?
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say, as I said in the main segment before we were talking about the news, I love this adventure, and I recognize it's not perfect. It's very easy for me to be positive because this is literally one of my favorite adventures of all time. And I know exactly why that's so. It's because all of its imperfections are things where I love to spend my time. So they weren't imperfections at all. They were entree, s'il vous plaît, to do all the awesome work that I wanted to do anyway. And so when I ran this campaign, it was 2 years. That was just an absolute pleasure to run this. Where someone else would say, oh, I ran into this problem or that problem. For me, this was just all butterscotch pudding. I was loving it. It was all flan. It was great.
I ran parts of this adventure. I was a guild adept at the time that this adventure came out. And as the guild adepts, we were doing a lot of, like we said in our main or in our news and commentary section, plug and play pieces for adventures, things like that. So I wrote an alternate introduction to this adventure that takes you up until you get to the town. I forget the name, went right out of my head. Omu?
Nyanzaru?
No. Nope. When you go and where the tomb actually is, the city
Omu.
there.
Yeah.
Omu, thank you. It took you on a different path through, and then it starts this adventure in Omu. Mm-hmm. So I ran this adventure from that point on. And like you, I had a great time with this adventure. This was probably one of the longer running campaigns that I've run, because we took our time and we really explored Omu. We really delved into it. And it was right up my player's alley, the way this adventure flowed from that point forward. So we got a lot of great gameplay out of it.
Yeah. Well, should we jump into the product history?
Let's do that. Tomb of Annihilation was denounced with, not denounced. Let me enunciate. Tomb of Annihilation was announced with great fanfare as the 5th edition hardback adventure for levels 1 through 11, published on the 19th of September 2017. While Storm King's Thunder had some strong promotion in a casual live event from an LA gaming store and a few online events, this adventure really began a marketing push that we would see for several years to come in the form of streaming, influencers, and more. In fact, the stream of Annihilation took place on June 2nd and 3rd, 2017, and you can still see it on YouTube. It has special live games and interviews to create interest for the product. All right, tell us now about the inspiration for this adventure, Teos.
Yeah, the inspiration is this adventure I'm holding in my hands, The Tomb of Horrors, a classic. Is it renown or infamy? Tomb of Horrors is written by Gary Gygax. It's for levels 10 to 14, module S1. And this adventure famously was written by Gary Gygax to basically kill off the player characters from his annoying players who thought they could beat everything. Well, I'll put you in this and teach you a lesson. And that has created really a lot of infamy over the years. And so it's something that rests in people's sort of brains and sort of the overconscious of the consciousness of the hobby. And so it brings back these ideas, elements from it, and features the same villain of Acererak, which is like somehow supposed to be pronounced Acerak, but not going to happen with me. Taking that villain from the world of Greyhawk, where Tomb of Horrors is situated, to the Land of Chult in the Forgotten Realms. Yes, they could have done the Amidio jungle and I think that would have been a better fit, but nope, we get the Forgotten Realms. It's still great. And this also serves as a source book, updating the information from TUI in the 1993 Jungles of Chult source book, which had some issues. And so this moves it forward, not in a way that maybe pleases everybody, but really does move it forward. And Shawn, there were just so many related products and adventures that came off of this. This is truly, in that heyday of 5th edition, it is the 7th season of AL, because the 6th season was the short yawning portal season. It's the second 5e D&D Open that you and I got to work on.
With Shawn Molly.
With Shawn Molly, and just so much excitement going on at Origins when people were playing through the Open and doing all kinds of really neat things, meeting Ubtao in person. That was fun. The Guild Adepts are born around this time. So this is the first adventure that has tons of cool supplements released right after the adventure comes out, including an entire Mesro arc that adds to play. We'll talk about later. You wrote an intro, you mentioned. WizKids had a mini series. They had both collectible minis and they had like a terrain and trap set. That's where this awesome, I'm holding up a green devil kind of piece that you can plunk down on your game. They had a board game from WizKids using that cooperative system we saw with Ravenloft and a Shardalon. There was one for Tomb of Annihilation. Neverwinter MMO had a 2-part Tomb storyline, heavily emulating the adventure. In fact, kind of spoiled it if you weren't careful. Ack Inc. played through it and spoiled the ending, which Mike Shea likes to talk about. There were things like dice sets that I'm holding up with some not great dice inside that were really incredibly disappointing, plain green looking dice. Patches, them wearing the t-shirt from Bald Man Games when we ran things. Yeah. My water glass. I mean, just if I start looking around my house, I'll find endless numbers of things that came off of this season. And since then, WizKids has released more, and they're just all kinds of things. And so there was a lot going on. Tomb was led by Chris Perkins, and you can feel his voice throughout this project. But it has really great writing, major parts written by Will Doyle, Steve Winter, and Adam Lee. Adam Lee, when I talked to him ages ago on Twitter, he was talking about how he did some of the really creative outdoor encounters. Will Doyle wrote much of the Tomb of the Nine Gods, and that whole Company of the Yellow Banner is his adventuring group that went through it and died. Pendleton Ward of Adventure Time consulting on the project. So a lot of really interesting things that came together to make both the project and larger kind of experience that people had.
Well, thank you, Teos, for sharing your swag of annihilation there. That was a lot. As for those of you on the podcast, Teos was literally holding up everything that he was mentioning. He was holding up for the camera. So Collector Teos has entered the conversation. All right, so now we're going to talk about what is best of this adventure. And so we will be spoiling it. And if you are going to be upset by being spoiled on a 9-year-old adventure, now's the time to check out. Otherwise, hang around and hear the tales of the Tomb of Annihilation. So what is best of this adventure? Let's first start with the premise and the approach. This, to me, in our previous segment, we talked about plot versus story and how plot is what's in the adventure and story is what you create. The plot of this adventure is one of the most radical, awesome, innovative, fun, everything about this. What's happening is people can no longer be raised from the dead. And when I heard that, the first thing I thought of was I sort of ran through how does this change the world? And it doesn't change the world for 90%, 99% of the people, right? Because if you're a common folk, you can't be brought back from the dead anyway. It's just those adventuring folks and the really, really rich and powerful folks.
The 1%.
Well, yawn. Okay. But since the adventurers are the protagonists of these stories, this becomes really big. Oh, I died, but revivify and I'm back. Oh, I died, but the cleric is 12th level and raised dead and yay. Oh, I can't do that anymore. Oh, even worse, that happened to me a few months ago, and now my pinky just fell off.
Yeah.
What's going on? That for the basis for an adventure is amazing.
Yeah. I think the adventure is on that line. Like when we reviewed Storm King, right? We've read over the plot and it's like, whew, there are a lot of like extra societies and things that I might have cut. Here, it's on the edge, but it's manageable because it comes at you in phases. But essentially, there is this death curse, right? And the reason is that the Lich Acererak, coming back from that old Tomb of Horrors adventure, and now on the cover of this, he's, on the cover of your DMG, right? Same one, yeah. The first DMG. So Acererak has tied a dying death god fetus, known as an Atropal, to a temple in Chult. And whenever someone dies, the soul is going to the Atropal. And powered into this device known as the Soulmonger, and then that's fueling the Atropal. And if the Atropal gets enough soul energy, it'll basically just destroy the world and create great power for Acererak. So, yay. This is, of course, creating all that problem you mentioned, Shawn. It also means that powerful entities like Zastam of the Red Wizards of Thay are sensing this great change, being liches, and he has sent Valindra Shadowmantle to go get it or destroy it. She's heavily detailed in the 4th edition Neverwinter campaign set. Ras Nasi, a former paladin protector in Chult, became a betrayer long before this adventure, unleashed a dead horde across the jungle. He has now become a Yuan Ti and seeks to perhaps end the world by bringing Dendar the Night Serpent in to crack the world. So you got 2 world-ending possibilities. He lairs in Omu, this lost city, where the Tomb of the 9 Gods and the Soulmonger is. So he's going to figure into things. And then we have the Tomb of the 9 Gods that was built by Acererak, named after the 9 trickster gods who are partly sort of fueling the creation of this place. They aren't quite gods, but they tricked Chultans into worshipping and empowering them when Ubtao sort of left Chult to its own devices. They would love to regain power. Their essences are tied to the tomb by Acererak, and they will try to help the heroes in their own, sometimes useful way, if the heroes can free them. But each tomb is, of course, heavily trapped. So you've got this need to get to Chult, figure out what is causing the death curse, where it is, find this lost city, deal with everybody else who's involved in this plot, get to the Tomb of the 9 Gods, find the 9 trickster tombs, get the pieces you need, stop the Atropal, save the world.
And that may sound complicated, but it's actually really not. It's really quite simple if you get to the point of it, which is go to the place where this fetus death god is and destroy it. And the problem is finding it, getting there, figuring out where it is, and how to get it in this lost area of Chult that is not well mapped, not well explored. So how is the adventure introduced? An ex-adventurer named Sindra Sylvain hires the characters in Baldur's Gate. She is a victim of this curse, so she is wasting away, having been resurrected at some point in her past. She learned from the Harpers that the source of the death curse is in Chult. She had hired some really, really powerful characters, but they failed. So she teleports you right to Port Nyanzaru in order for you to begin your investigation. So the structure of the adventure then is, first, it's a search. You have to, on this entire untamed continent, find your goal, which can be a lot.
Yes.
So
for the DM as
I'll
well.
Let you take it.
It can be, and I think that's one of the early knocks, is there are only a few entities that really know how to get to the tomb, to the lost city of Omu, which leads you to the tomb. And the issue is that these unlocking these can be a little difficult. Now, the text does try to help you, but it's still something that I think DMs wrestled with. If you manage to do that, then kind of smooth sailing. And if you're enjoying the process, right? Because one of the reasons that the information is sort of gated, right, is these searches happen in steps. First, search Port Nyanzaru, learn what's going on there, which is also to say, enjoy Port Nyanzaru and all the fun experiences it has. Get lost in its plots for a bit, and then go, oh yeah, there's that ticking time bomb of the Death Curse. I need to get into the jungle and find these places. And then you're meandering around the jungle, and as much as that might be fun, you really do have to get to Omu. And when you get to Omu, then you've got to get into the tomb. Once you're in the tomb, you're locked in. You got to get through that tomb and reach the bottom, having unlocked everything. And the reality is that, for your average campaign that isn't going to last many sessions, well, that's your true ticking time bomb. Forget the Death Curse. It's going to peter out. And there are a couple of parts here where if you don't super love exploration, that might go longer than you want. If you don't love dungeon delving, well, that might go longer than you want. And so I think there is a lot of possibility here for a DM to get more than they wanted. Guess what? You have the power, but the adventure doesn't, of course, tell you that. And then we end up with different, how some DMs love it and some don't.
Yep. So chapter 1 talks about Port Nyanzaru. The setting of Chult has been updated and modernized a bit from its previous renditions. This places a group of 7 merchant princes in control of Port Nyanzaru. It is the only truly populated city on this continent. And so part of the lore that the players will lean into is that the rest of the peninsula was once prosperous, but they lost their way when they were taken in by these trickster gods. And their primary god, Ubtao, left. So everything sort of fell into chaos, also allowing the release of undead to absolutely infect and infest this area.
And it's not a pretty land, right? This is a land that's covered in dinosaurs to begin with, so it's not like it was ever safe.
Right.
But now it's really just it's too much, and so everything has fallen. The dynasty broke of the rulers. Nobody knows where any of the remaining royalty are. If there are any, probably not, is what anyone would say. And so you've retreated to this one Port Nyanzaru. And what's interesting here is so I'm just going to say quickly, I really love, this is one of these adventures that just really paints a very different view of the culture. And I'm holding up the art of all, Nyanzaru as a port where people are black, right? This is based on a loose mirror, not even a mirror. It draws inspiration from African societies. And it received criticism when the adventure came out. I think it was on Otaku was the site that where it was reviewed. But I want to see more of this, not less of this. I do want to see it done better. But it was really a neat, very different kind of environment to what a lot of 5th edition adventures provide you. And what it does from previous editions is take us forward to say, these merchant princes are a rightful person to head it up. It's a little businessy, but they are all Chultan. But there are threats from abroad, right? These colonialist powers, the Flaming Fist from Baldur's Gate, the Thanes, there's several others, they're all actively trying to usurp control and exploit Chult. Gee, are there any parallels there? And so this places Port Nyanzaru on a knife's edge, where the heroes could create change. And if there's one thing that I do really follow this adventure that I think can be really, really awesome for a campaign, the adventure doesn't do enough to tell the characters, hey, you can have a hand in this, right? You can help those bad foreign powers be out of here. You can help find the rightful rulers to this place and change it all around. You can empower this. It's not just about the Death Curse. It's also about how you can play a hand in Chult. Not as saviors, but as you always are, adventurers, right? As hands in this that empower the lands that you're in. The port is full of all kinds of neat places in town to explore. There are dinosaur races, which are a lot of fun. Volo is there, hilariously selling his book, Volo's Guide to Monsters, which had just come out. The factions of various representatives. You can buy special gear like insect repellent and rain catchers. There are guides. The guides, I think, are really fun, and I tweaked them a bit in my play. I think the real key is if you tie guides to specific areas of the map, then you encourage players to switch between them. But the guides offer a lot of color. They often have ulterior motives. One of them is like, yeah, I'll take you anywhere you want. but first we're going to go here because I need you to save my, clan from this dragon. Like, it really kind of interesting stuff.
Yeah. And I liked this idea of the guides. It gave permission for game masters. Sorry, I have to say dungeon masters because we're talking about D&D. Yeah. It gave dungeon masters the permission to step into the role, and not only that, but step into a few different roles if they need to, while also giving players the opportunity to do some role playing with a consequence, right? Mm-hmm. You're talking to a guide, and this is the guide you want, but they have this one quirk. And so you have to get the players past that if they're going to get the best guide. And this other guide who seems perfect is the one that's going to betray them. So, there's some fun role playing with an actual little meat on the bone of it in terms of the consequences that will come from it.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are a number of side quests, right? You can hear about the pirates that you could go off and hunt. So there are a lot of possible distractions, and there are things that are more on point, like take the priest, Undril Silvertusk. She needs an escort to Camp Vengeance, which is run by the Order of the Gauntlet. All those factions are involved in various ways here. And so there's a lot that you can do here to sort of breathe life into the port. I know that we had a lot of fun with the port and what it represented, and speaking to the merchant princes, kind of making deals with them. And when I ran this adventure, it's important to say I was also playtesting the AC Inc. franchise rules that we were writing at the time. And so I used this as the model for that, and the experimental test bed. And so one of the things that happened is we ended up with a B team of their employees, because one of the players wanted to start a church in town. He had been searching for who is my god, actually. And he thought, maybe it is Savras who's here. So I'm going to build a church to Savras, explore that. And then those hirelings that was sort of the franchise, was this church. But it was also doing various things based on what the party wanted, such as a certain pirate ship they took over became their mercantile vessel. Let's call it that. They would meet up with other vessels on the ocean and exchange goods at Sword Point. Yeah. And so it was we had a lot of fun with that kind of tension, and it involved all the merchant princes, and that allowed me to keep being in Port Nyanzaru even when they were in the tomb, which was a lot of fun, and even in the jungle. So I often, unlike a lot of campaigns, there's often this phase of you're in Port Nyanzaru, you're in the jungle, you're in the tomb. By using the franchise system, I was able to keep being in those places with their sort of hirelings, which was cool.
And the AL seasons focused on Nyanzaru and provided some really great locations, and the epics that took place there were very memorable.
Yeah, really good. I wish those were available for everybody to bring into their campaigns, because Will Doyle did an incredible job of those. There is a tension in this section between the desire to do fun things like dinosaur races and the death curse. And I think that's always a problem when we talked about this with Storm King, when you're like, ooh, I got to solve this giant problem. And someone says, cool, could you deliver wine to this town? And you're like, I got to solve a giant problem. The DM's like, just go deliver the wine. There's a little bit of that. Like, we got to get going. Well, can I interest you in a dinosaur race? And you look at your DM like, really? Okay, I guess so. If we have time, And so I wrote a supplement called Chult Death Curse Revised, where I gave a death curse that plays out in stages. And that gives you the time to do all these fun things. With Eric Mengi, I published Jungle Treks, providing jungle encounters, including mudslides, river trips, and much more. You, as Guild Adept, you worked on various offerings. You had encounters in Port Nyanzaru, encounters in the jungles of Chult, and an alternate intro to the tomb called Return of the Lizard King. So all these can change up that early experience.
Yep, for sure. So chapter 2 then covers the Land of Chult. And this is the jungle unexplored largely by people that came out and made maps. So we don't know what's going on or what's there. And I thought the map was incredible too, right? Because there was the map for the game master. Then there was the map that the players got, which was a hex with as you would see in early maps of our own world's exploration, the coastlines were pretty well mapped, but everything more than about 10 miles inland was blank. So we get that map where it doesn't detail this jungle filled with dinosaurs, with undead, with vine-covered temples, with lost treasures, and so much more. If you like Indiana Jones, and I know a lot of people like that sort of pulpy stuff, including one Teos Abadia, this is right up your alley.
Well, 100%.
So what chapter 2, if chapter 1 was more about role playing and finding the right guide and talking to all of these different leaders and mercantile houses, chapter 2 is all about exploration. So we get an updated hex travel procedure, which largely used the DMG 2014 rules, but with some updates and pulling it all into one set of rules. What did you think about that, Teos?
It worked pretty well for me. It's got a pretty useful exploration procedure of, what is the weather? What are the navigation checks? Maybe we get lost. If you don't have a ranger, that makes this all easier. Random encounters, check for dehydration and disease if you want that. My group did not, so that just left the thing. There were no throat leeches for my campaign, but if you want it, it's got that kind of thing. And they tie this in pretty well to things like the initial quests, which lead themselves to travel by slow-moving rivers via canoe. And when you do that, then you naturally will end up at some of the like Camp Righteous and the Order of the Gauntlet locations. And that makes it kind of fun because you start by river, then later you're going to be moving by foot. You start out with, sort of what is the Order of Gauntlet doing there and how do we feel about it? And oh, look, they're actually really bad at being in the jungle, which is kind of fun. Yeah, I like, one of the first things you probably do is take that character we mentioned, that NPC Silver Tusk, to the Order of the Gauntlet. And so you take a canoe ride, maybe you devise some encounters there, maybe you get a little lost there, but you end up at their old camp, Camp Righteous, which was lost to undead, now taken over by Batiri goblins. The goblins are amazing. It's just a fantastic example of just changing things just enough, right? They're just goblins, but they wear these masks to look very fearsome, and they like to stack together, which doesn't greatly change how they operate, but they form this battle stack, which is hilarious. A small dungeon is by this old abandoned camp called the House of Man and Crocodile. Presents a fun story of sort of this man who had to carry a crocodile around the world. And if you figure that out, what you do is one PC should ride on the shoulders of another while they go through this trap-filled area, which will make it easier. And if this experience wasn't enough, what my group absolutely adored was at the end, you find an alchemy jug as the treasure. And boy, did we make a lot of mayonnaise in this adventure, Shawn.
There was a lot of mayonnaise is generally the result of an alchemy jug falling into the hands of the party.
Yep.
So we know that Camp Vengeance is the current Gauntlet outpost, but it's barely standing after so many attacks and disease. And the leadership of the camp leaves a lot to be desired. So I like to make the characters look competent, not necessarily because they're competent, but in direct correlation to some of the NPCs that you come across. And I love that this, they're not walking into a situation with competent people who are doing right and good. They're walking into a veritable poop show of incompetence.
Yeah, and I found that this adventure is full of moments like this where you as DM can just, roll with it, take a couple of the quests and move on, or you can add your own pieces. And so one thing I did here, which I honestly remembered as being an adventure, and then I looked at it and find it, I had camp be attacked by a zombie T-Rex spewing out, as it does in the book. It's one of the new monsters. It vomits forth zombies, which is amazing. And so I, built up this terrain where there were top walls, and this thing is attacking and spewing out zombies. And I had a moment. So one of the characters was an Order of the Gauntlet person. And they had some premonitions, or had to figure out how it tied into their backstory, but something along the lines of like, do you want to ascend in this order, or do you want to kind of leave it? And he's standing next to the commander Breakbone as this T-Rex attacks and shakes the commander loose. And so he has the choice. Do you want to grab the commander or just let him fall to his doom? And, he ended up saving him, going, no, this guy can lead. Even if he's incompetent, he can lead it. I'm not going to become the leader of the Order of the Gauntlet. But it was that kind of fun stuff that you could ease. I just felt like this campaign allowed me to make these kinds of neat story character choices all the time.
Yeah. And if you want an adventure that gives you interesting and fun locations to explore that aren't necessarily delved deep into, but give you enough to at least run it or build from, you've got a dragon turtle demanding payments from passing ships. You've got grung villages. You have terrafolk and their war with the Aarakocra. You have the Heart of Uvtau, a floating heart-shaped earth moat that's inhabited by the aforementioned Valindra Shadowmantle, who has changed form and poses as a scholar who's interested in studying the Soulmonger. You have Rakhamar, an abandoned albino dwarf forge taken over by fire newts and connected to the red dragon that lairs there. Frost giants there, yes, in the middle of the jungle, searching for the Ring of Winter. Pirates, cliffside monasteries that are hiding Chult's royalty. A hag named Nanny Poo-Poo, who will offer the characters bad deals. Yeah. Nangalore, the former home of Omu's queen, where she was cursed to become a Medusa. Another Batari goblin village where the entire thing sits on top of a net so that if big dinosaurs come by, they can cut the ropes and fling the entire thing 1,000 yards away.
Amazing, right? That's just
awesome,
full of
stuff.
Creativity. I think it was Adam Lee who came up with that one. It's just the leader is Queen Grab Stab. Just fantastic. Yeah. And at the end of this, you're going to find Omu somewhere in the process of this. Perhaps you're returning to Nyanzaru periodically to stock up and supply and heal, but you are eventually going to find, whether it's through a guide or Omu's queen, or somehow you will learn the location of Omu. And then we get to chapter 3, Dwellers of the Forbidden City. Where's that name from, Shawn?
What's that? Yeah.
The name.
There is an old, what was the old adventure? It was something of the Forbidden City.
I think it's the same name, isn't it?
Oh, is it Dwellers? I couldn't remember
I think it is.
What the noun was at the start of that. Well, anyway, it is an homage to that classic adventure, and one of the favorites that we heard from Chris Perkins saying one of his favorite adventures. So as the characters explore this city, where they know that somewhere around here is the cause of this death curse, they sort of have to do a little bit of exploration, but in a local setting, where they learn the story of the 9 trickster gods, providing clues in each of these trickster gods' temples that will help them understand and find the tomb that they are seeking. So Omu is inhabited by Yuan-ti, including the entrance to a Fane of the Night Serpent, which is where these Yuan-ti seek to wake Dendar, who will consume the world. Teos held up a map of the of Omu there, and you have Grung and you have Vegapygmies, another one of Teos's favorites, and Tabaxi hunters that make the investigation not just go from here to here to here, but it is a sort of living ruin of a city where people and things come and go. The Red Wizards of Thay, who are working under Valindra, also seek to enter the shrines around Omu and gain these puzzle cubes from the 9 temples of these trickster gods. So you're in a race with these Red Wizards to do that first.
Yeah, and there's a nice process here for the DM. So the moment you get your first cube, the Thayans get one. Mm-hmm. Then you have a 25% chance per day that the Thayans gain another. So you are literally racing them. Once a total of 5 cubes have been found by the total of anybody, Ras Nasi begins setting ambushes at shrines because they're realizing, the Yuan-ti are realizing someone's around. And if they get any captives, they'll bring them to the Fane. And you might even just see that they're Yuan-ti and follow them and learn where they are. Once 8 cubes are gained, by again, total across anybody, Ras Nasi gets the last one, the 9th one. So this sets up a clear conflict with Théans and a necessity to go check out that Fane, right? It's very clever design. Again, railroad, not if it feels natural, right? Which it did not feel like a railroad to us. It felt like a true race against the Théans and trying to figure out what the Théans want. And then, wait, what are these Yuan Ti that came in partway through? And so that overlapping or layering of what kicks in when actually worked really well for us in our run. And in between, we got all those awesome random encounters with, these feathered T-Rexes and all sorts of things like that, which makes it super fun. All of the shrines are great with all the short puzzles and interactions. It's not too much to be overwhelming, but just kind of a nice taste. And
the design of those was particularly delicious because that really did fit this sort of 90-minute. You only have an hour or two, or you have 4 hours and you want to get 2 in, you could do that. And the pace was excellent. It was a short, quick, expressive, fun little bit of gameplay.
Yeah, and it really reinforces what these 9 gods are about, which you sort of want to learn more and more over time, because at the end of it, it'll matter a lot, and there'll be increasing numbers of kind of points, puzzle-like situations where you need to know what they're about.
Mm-hmm. So after you get as many cubes as you can, you realize you have to go into the Fane of the Night Serpent. So this chapter is all about this Yuan Ti location. There's a schism between Ras Nasi and the Yuan Ti high priest Fenthaza, creating an opportunity for the PCs to play both sides against each other to gain the puzzle cubes they need. And I always love that as well. There's rules for infiltrating the temple, ways to handle being captured, and then turning menial tasks into ways to escape or discover new things. It really is a cool medium for a dungeon with fun places to explore and secrets to uncover.
Yeah, there are a number of memorable pieces in here. The Hydra layer and the underground river I remember being a lot of fun. I used Dungeon of Doom in this. So in the center of the Fane, there is this sort of blood temple. And what I kind of did is what's not clear in here is sort of, well, how are they trying to awaken Dendar the Night Serpent? It's just sort of like, don't know. And they're just, the Yuan Ti are just sort of looking for ways to do that. So what I did is actually that if you went into this blood pool, you went into the Dungeon of Doom. And in the Dungeon of Doom was this entity, which I basically took the final boss and made her be part Yuan Ti, which she's already very snake-like, so it was perfect, very easy. And what I did was say, Ras Nasi throws you in here because one of two things are going to happen. You either win and Dendar goes back to sleep, or you lose and look, he's the guy who made it happen. Right, so either way, he wins, and Fenthaza, the person he's competing with, Fenthaza, will lose power. So that's why he sent him, which then allowed me to run all of Dungeon of Doom because I love making a campaign into a 2-year experience. But this place is also really neat. Like they came in and attacked Ras Nasi, and Ras Nasi just blew them away, like 2 fireballs in a row. And they were all nicely grouped up for me, and they were all bleeding out. The druid ran away. They were all captured and basically given this option. And there is a lot here that talks about if they get caught. And well, it's for a reason, because a lot of these encounters are really hard. And there are a lot of situations where they can end up in deep pain and then captured by Ras Nasi and given some sort of a choice in some way to go again, or by Fenthaza and, given a choice to go against the other and serve their needs, which gives that kind of neat intrigue. But at the end of it, somehow you will have gotten, whether it's by beating or by making a deal, you'll have gotten that 9th puzzle cube. And now you can go to the Tomb of the 9 Gods.
And the Tomb of the 9 Gods is large. It has 6 very detailed levels. We could take several episodes just to cover everything that happens here. As an homage to Tomb of Horrors. Tomb of Horrors, thank you. I kept wanting to say Tomb of Annihilation, which is what we're talking about. There are traps everywhere. Some basic traps, some really dastardly traps. The entrance itself is trapped in a way that can instantly demoralize your players, which is what I did. They made very poor choices, and they rolled very poorly on top of that. And it was hilariously everything that could have gone wrong went wrong times 3. They were basically a TPK, except for one character before they even got through the door. Amazing.
And if I remember correctly, like the first thing is just set up to make you feel away, because it's one of these things where when you go in, you will trigger like a pit trap, and there will be a lever on the wall and a ticking clock or something like that. Like I think it literally counts down. And so you've got to decide, do I pull the lever? And you don't know what is the right choice. And there is no way to really determine it. You just got to make a judgment call. And so just right there paints the picture of we're going to be in for some interesting times. And I think you get past that. And at the end of the corridors, a green devil face. And so you're like, oh my, what here we, just what's going on? And and the players realize this is a very different type of experience. And
Yeah. So lots of fun encounters here. There are literal skeleton keys in that the skeletons that the players face have keys growing out of the tops of their heads. So you don't need to find the right key. You need to find the right skeleton, defeat it, take its head to get through the particular door that this skeleton is the key to. Yep. Unusual for dungeons like this, you get to see who's maintaining the dungeon, right? There are tomb dwarves that are led by withers, who will repair the dungeon. And so you can have the players talk to withers, and withers will talk to the characters or come up behind them and say, oh, I'm going to have to clean this up later. I see, that sort of thing. Hilarious.
Yeah. There was a memorable fight we had with Withers. That was pretty great. And then just learning this history of the dungeon through him. The 9 gods. So each of these levels spread around them are the 9 trickster gods, and they will inhabit you and provide advice. So and often these conflict, right? So you'll go into a room and there'll be information for the DM to say if somebody has this god in them, it urges them to run right in and pull the lever. If you talk to someone else, they urge caution and closing your eyes, things like that. Right. It's like, well, do you listen? Do you, which one's right? And might be that both of them are wrong.
Yeah. I always love things like that too, that conflicting information. So at the bottom of this entire dungeon is called the Cradle of the Death God. So you go through a few more traps and challenges and hags and horrifying toys. There's an exciting battle on walkways over lava with the giant death god fetus and a Sararak who is wielding a sphere of annihilation. And just such an amazingly fun battle with all of this going on. If you don't have to defeat the Sararak, you only have to destroy the Soulmonger in order to stop the death curse. Yeah. And my group lost sight of that. We're focusing all on a Sararak. Finally, right before the last one died, they remembered what they were there for and were able to destroy the Soulmonger. But we had pretty much a TPK through strange tactical choices.
Love it. Yeah, our group did pretty well. They had done some very smart things. I think they'd learned a lot from the various trickster gods and so on. And so they came in pretty prepared, but they had been holding on to a wish spell. And there was a situation where there was, literally someone falling into the lava, and it all looked like it was going to head down. And they used that wish, and that was and kudos to my players, because they were so afraid of me and the wording of the wish that I literally had to say, no, you can wish for more than that. Like, you're being too safe, because they were really, up against the wall. And so I said, this wish came from Ubtao because it happened, early in the campaign that way. And so they upped it a bit, and that gave them a real, someone came back from death through that. And it was great. It was a lot of fun. And I did beef up a Sararak, which I remember Mike Shea has a webpage where he talks about better lich tactics that make it a better fight. But it's super fun. It's epic. You can just look at DMs who have shared all the pictures of their setups with, these 3D ramps and the catwalks and the lava underneath and the giant, how you represented. Now there's a mini that exists for the Atropal, but back then we had to come up with what to put up there. And yeah, just a lot of fun. But eventually, you've defeated a Serac. A Serac will reform to a Spirit Jar, so that's not a problem for a Serac other than the setback of this whole campaign. But you have had victory or defeat. and if you did victory, then you are able to exit the tomb finally and go back to Port Nyanzaru. Which, what I found that was interesting is there were a lot of places my players never visited in any form. But during the whole time in the tomb, as I said, we were running this franchise, and from their church, they had a sort of B team that they caught onto, and they, with those groups, visited a lot of additional locations. Still didn't get to everything, but they visited additional locations in the jungle, including the monastery. And so they were able to solve some major things that their first group had not, which meant they now knew, who could be restored the power. They had done a lot to get foreign influences out. And so this left Port Nyanzaru in a very changed way, which was sort of neat to end the campaign with, that I think a lot of groups might not do that, even if the adventure does actually have that really cool possibility.
And then you get a few cool appendices. You get 2 new character backgrounds, the archaeologist and the anthropologist.
Perfect.
Some random encounters that are short, but good fodder for your imagination. Some discoveries. You might make flora and fauna magic items. Who doesn't want scorpion armor, right, Teos?
Love it.
And then all the monsters and NPCs, many, many new monsters, from the El Mirage to the Vegapygmy to the Froghemoth to the Flail Snail, all good stuff. And if you do an homage to Tomb of Horrors, you have to have some full color images to show the players to help set the scene and explain the puzzles. You get a handout for the trickster gods of Omu. So handouts for the powers that they give you when they inhabit you. And then a double-sided poster map, including the DM version of the land, and then the blank hex scrawl player version. So overall, a wonderful adventure and a strong contender for best 5e hardcover adventure out there.
I think most people love Curse of Strahd, and that's fair, but this one does get a lot of praise as well. And it's fun to just see, folks who are running it today, and as they go through and post on blogs and so on. I love looking at those. Like every time I hear somebody's running Tomb of Annihilation, I get happy and I want to hear how it's gone in their game.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody, for listening, and thank you, Teos, for sharing your love of Tomb of Annihilation and your love of gaming. If you would like to help us keep the lights on here at Mastering Dungeon Central, you can go to our Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/masteringdnd. You can become a Master of Dungeon supporter, and we thank you for that. That really does help us do this thing that we do. If you are a Master of Realm supporter, you get a special shout out in our show notes. And I believe you also get some of the freebies that we offer. And if you become a Master of the Multiverse patron, you get that free stuff, and you get your name mangled by me right now. Agile Monk of Fantasy Companion Workshops, Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Rudy Chainsaw Basso, Dave Bastiensen, Derek the Bearded GM, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Boschjan from Duality Press, Calvin Bridges of Alus, Brobo Ballin, Kevin Criswell, Dead Inertia DM, Evil John, Evan at Nimbleco, Kevin Davis, Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon.com, James Fisher, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, Ted Ngana of Frog Helmet Games, Ben Heisler and Paige Lightman, Simon the Hunter, Shawn Hurst, Hyperlexic, the Jaunty Mantis TTRPG Podcast, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, JR of the Twilight Perspective, JT Evans, Brian King, Jim Klingler, Gail Curmandy, Schwill from Maine, Leftria, Chad Lynch, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Jaron from Mathis Arcanum, Eric Mengi, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, Michael, John Mickey, Sean Molly, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson, creator of the Deck of Player Safety, DT Norris of DT and Dragons, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Philip and Lindsay, Frog Prince at Tentacle Squelching Wetly, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Ricardo Who Might Adventure, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, Joe Rosso, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, Dave Rideout, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simons, Tim Smith, Spark from Dunnar Games, Jeff Stevens at jeffstevensgames.com, Josh Adliwanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, Talis the Stormlord, Jeremy Talaman from Masters of Alchemy, Trace, Ryan Schrook, Joe Tyler, Earthworm, welcome, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, Vidwocles G, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Wozniak, Waterford Wizard, Chris Webster, Ian Wright. I will say it again, Ian Wright, because we owe you a couple. And Z. Walt Winfrey. Thank you so much for your support. Again, you can go to patreon.com/masteringdnd to help us out. Teos, what have you been up to on your social media?
Ooh, a blog post all about skills and what happens when you use help and guidance, or when lots of players want to roll. You go like, hey, make a check, and all of a sudden you see like the rest of the tables rolling. What does that do to the math of the game? I look at that. And then on the video, I've been having fun reviewing these DM APs, the Dungeon Master's actual plays, and seeing what lessons we can pull out, whether it's having your agency taken away by one character just suddenly doing a thing, or some new ones that'll be in this week's video. So check those out through alphastream.org. Shawn, where do I find you?
You find me sitting right here 23 hours a day. But if you're online and you can't come to my home, you can go to the social medias, find me at Shawn Merwin, follow the podcast on the socials at Mastering DND. We also have a YouTube channel, so you can go to youtube.com/@masteringdungeons to see our smiling faces while you hear our flowing voices. So, Teos, we have survived the Tomb of Annihilation. What are we going to do now?
I'm going to get one of these green devil faces for my house, because trash pickup's kind of expensive.
This is true. And I'm going to come stick my head in it, see what happens.
That's the end of your writing career.
Whee!